자, 이제 우리는 흙가래를 이런 식으로 만들어야 되는데, 그래서 한 단 한 단 흙가래를 쌓아서 높이 올라갈 거예요.
이거 하는 동안에 정신 집중이 돼서 참 행복합니다.
도예 프로그램은 만드는 것이 주 목적이지만 그것보다는 나를 위한 시간을 갖는 것, 그것 자체가 굉장히 중요한 것이 아닐까 이렇게 생각하고요. 도자기 프로그램을 하면서 행복감을 가졌으면 하는 바람입니다.
저희 춤추는 상세 필봉 100년 공연은 실제 이야기를 바탕으로 창작된 공연입니다. 무엇보다 마을 공동체 문화를 지키고자 했던 양상세 그리고 필봉 마을 사람들의 공동체 문화를 지켜가는 과정에서 있었던 실화적인 이야기를 지금의 의미에서 무엇보다 공동체 의미를 다시 새겨볼 수 있는 공연이라고 할 수 있습니다.
적어도 그늘에서 3주 이상 말려야 돼요. 3주?
이건 집에서 이렇게 해볼 수 없는 거잖아. 그래서 여기 필봉에 와서 공연도 보고 또 이런 체험도 해보니까 굉장히 재밌었어요.
요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도 인생 번호를 찾을 수도 있지. 제일 핫한 포토 스팟은 여기. 한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸? 진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K-바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지?
김치? 종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색.
김밥? 시장에선, 산에선, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥? 취향 따라, 입맛 따라.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
In our headlines on this Thursday, December 19th, here in South Korea, the Constitutional Court says the president has yet to accept the legal documents it has been seeking to send ahead of his impeachment trial. And acting President Han Duck-soo vetoes 6 contentious bills unilaterally passed by opposition lawmakers at the parliament. Meanwhile, the U.S. Federal Reserve cuts its interest rates by 0.25 percentage points, but has projected fewer reductions next year. The Constitutional Court claims the president is rendering difficult the due process of serving legal documents by refusing to accept them. Our Peunji reports.
The Constitutional Court, which has started to discuss the early stages of President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial, said Thursday that it has again failed to deliver legal documents to Yoon's residence as the president refuses to accept them. This is the third time that the president has refused to receive documents related to his impeachment trial. The Constitutional Court has been repeatedly sending such documents to both the presidential office and Yoon's residence, but all have gone undelivered. The court said Thursday that if President Yoon continues to refuse to accept these documents, it will announce its position on Monday on whether the president's action should be regarded as deemed delivery. Meanwhile, Seok Dong-hyun, a lawyer for President Yoon and his longtime friend, said Yoon never ordered anyone to be arrested on the night of the martial law.
The president himself is also a lawyer. From what I've heard, he never used terms such as arrest or drag someone out.
His remarks come after military and intelligence officials have said President Yoon gave orders to arrest lawmakers, including prominent political figures, such as the ruling party leader Han Dong-un and the main opposition party leader Lee Jae-myung. According to the National Intelligence Service Deputy Director, Yoon reportedly said they must use this chance to arrest them and wipe them out when martial law was imposed. In a separate briefing earlier in the day, President Yoon's attorney also told reporters that Yoon never considered or agreed with the idea of insurrection.
As a president, he has neither considered nor agreed with the crime of insurrection. Since he has never had such thoughts, it would be regarded that he does not agree with those thoughts.
Seok also said Yoon is willing to represent himself in legal proceedings related to his brief imposition of martial law. He added that although Yoon remains apologetic for declaring martial law on December 3rd, he has a clear and confident position on the issues. After President Yoon was suspended from his duties following the parliament's vote last Saturday, all eyes are now on whether the Constitutional Court will remove him from office or restore his presidential powers. 배은지, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, questions have been raised within the prosecutor's office about the wisdom of transferring the insurrection investigation to the Corruption Investigation Office. Our Kim Jung-sil explains.
The investigation into the December 3rd martial law has taken a new turn. On Wednesday, the prosecution transferred the case to the Corruption Investigation Office for High-Ranking Officials, or the CIO. The move follows concerns over overlapping investigations with the prosecution, police, and the CIO all handling the same case. Officials stated that the transfer was meant to prevent further complications and address concerns about the legitimacy of the charges. However, after the decision was made, there was reportedly resistance within the prosecution's special investigation team as they claimed to have made significant progress and were frustrated by the sudden change. The transfer case includes allegations of treason against President Yoon Suk-yeol and former Safety Minister Lee Sang-min. While the CIO will now lead the investigation, it does not have the power to charge a sitting president. If evidence is found, the case will be referred back to the prosecution for formal charges. Meanwhile, the investigation continues to focus on the military's role during the martial law period. Around 1,500 soldiers were deployed with rifles, sniper rifles, tasers, and drone jamming devices, along with 10,000 rounds of live ammunition. 100 military vehicles and 12 helicopters were also involved in the operation. Earlier this week on Tuesday, police made a second attempt to raid the presidential office for crucial communication records, but once again, their efforts were blocked by security. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
And some 24 officials and presidential aides failed to show up at opposition-arranged parliamentary hearings slated for this Thursday at the National Assembly, citing a state affairs. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo has more.
All 22 key government officials includes aides to President Yoon, who were requested to appear at the National Assembly on Thursday to answer lawmakers' questions about the December 3rd declaration of martial law, chose not to show up.
Our committee intended to check the facts regarding the current serious situation by requesting the attendance and asking questions of officials, including the Chief of Staff to the President, the National Security Advisor, the Director of National Policy, and the Chief of the Presidential Security Service. But none of them are in attendance. I cannot but deplore the behavior of the presidential office.
The House Steering Committee, which was boycotted by the ruling People Power Party members, rescheduled the questioning to December 30th. The absentee officials were once again notified that they should appear on that day. Lawmaker Park Kyung-soo, the PPP chief deputy floor leader, told reporters on Thursday that the ruling party and the presidential office have decided not to participate in a session unilaterally scheduled by the Democratic Party. He added that the presidential office is currently busy reporting to acting President Han Duck-soo, and therefore officials there were unable to attend the session. This, as National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik held a press conference with foreign correspondents and reiterated the Assembly's determination to facilitate the procedure of the impeachment trial of President Yoon and have democracy fully restored in the country, thanks to the South Korean people who support them.
The source of the resilience of South Korea's democracy is these people, and this is why South Korea is strong.
Speaker Woo also shared that he sent letters to parliamentary leaders following the emergency at the Assembly earlier this month and said he will continue to make efforts to enhance parliamentary diplomacy. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Acting President Han Duck-soo has vetoed 6 disputed bills unilaterally passed by opposition lawmakers at the parliament. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
Acting President Han Duck-soo decided to veto 6 contentious bills forced through by the opposition party, but with a heavy heart as the government seeks closer cooperation with Parliament. This came at a special cabinet meeting on Thursday called by the interim leader, who exercised his right to request a reconsideration of bills passed at the National Assembly in November, having assumed executive powers while President Yoon Suk-yeol faces impeachment proceedings. The bills include the opposition Democratic Party's measures to stabilize prices of rice, agricultural and fishery products, and revise legislative powers. Explaining his decision, Han said mandatory rice purchases by the government would not stabilize prices, but only worsen excess supply and lead to a decline in prices. Meanwhile, overcompensating agricultural and fisheries production beyond disaster relief could lead to moral hazard. He also said the revisions to the National Assembly Act could hinder the smooth execution of the budget, while adjustments to the Act on testimonies and appraisals could violate individual freedoms. Han said his decision was made after much contemplation, as cooperation between the government and the ruling and opposition parties is more critical than ever. The opposition expressed discontent over the veto. Floor leader Park Chan-dae accused Han of disregarding public sentiment, warning if he abuses his veto power, he would face the consequences. However, the opposition is putting more emphasis on 2 particular bills it railroaded through last week. A bill to launch a special counsel investigation into First Lady Kim Gon-hee's alleged misconduct, and a bill seeking a special counsel probe into President Yoon Suk-yeol over his imposition of martial law. The DP has also been ramping up pressure on Han to fill up the 3 vacancies at the Constitutional Court to make up a full 9-member panel. 6 votes are required to impeach President Yoon, which as of now would require a unanimous decision. The acting president has to tread carefully as he aims to promote cooperation with the majority-holding opposition, which has threatened to seek Han's impeachment as well. He has before January 1st to decide whether or not to veto the special counsel bills. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea and Japan have reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening bilateral ties as well as the trilateral partnership with the U.S. Intentions to this end were shared during talks between acting President Han Duck-soo and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba earlier this morning. They also agreed to promote preparations for their 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations next year and to maintain trilateral security coordination with the U.S. in light of threats posed by North Korea and its military cooperation with Russia. Now, with regard to domestic politics, Mr. Han reassured the Japanese Prime Minister about the role of the rule of law in addressing the current fallout of Korea's short-lived martial law. And speaking of reassurance, the country's top economic official continues to ease concerns over Korea's financial markets. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin has details.
The government is moving to ensure that finance markets remain in stable territory after the passing of the second impeachment vote against President Yoon Suk-yeol. A sharp drop was previously seen in domestic stock markets in the days after President Yoon's unexpected declaration of martial law and its swift reversal. But this Monday, after the second impeachment vote on Saturday, the Kospi opened up, moving past the 2,500 mark and continued climbing before gradually stabilizing. Although it closed down on Monday, on Wednesday the benchmark index closed up more than 1% thanks to foreign investors turning to net buyers for the first time since the initial impeachment attempt. The Korean currency, however, has been slightly more volatile, closing past the 1,410 mark to the dollar the day after the brief imposition of martial law. And it surpassed the 1,430 mark after the failed first impeachment attempt and has remained in that range even after the second impeachment motion passed. But according to one expert, the fluctuations in the exchange rate are not severe enough to warrant extreme concern.
The Korean won has weakened to around 1,400 against the US dollar, which is around what it was during the 1997 Asian financial crisis and the 2008 financial crisis. But the factors behind are different, so as long as it doesn't surpass the 1,450 mark, you can say it's stable.
He also emphasized the importance of the government's role in building confidence in the country's economic system, which was in line with what Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok said during a rare joint press conference with foreign media on Wednesday.
Given ongoing market volatility due to domestic and external uncertainties, the government will work with all sectors to stabilize the economy, prioritizing external credibility.
To enhance credibility, the government will continue to operate a 24-hour monitoring system for the finance markets and boost incentives for foreign investments. 이수진, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has lowered its benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points for the third time in a row this year, while forecasting a more cautious approach that is next year. Our Moon Hye-ryun covers this latest cut.
The Fed has cut rates once again despite slower than expected progress made on inflation in the United States. On Wednesday, local time, following the last Federal Open Market Committee meeting of the year, Fed policymakers slashed the benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points, bringing it down to the 4.25 to 4.5% range. The latest action brings the total cut made since September to 1 full percentage point and comes despite inflation continuing to remain stubbornly above the Fed's 2% target. The U.S. Consumer Price Index jumped 2.7% in November compared to the same month last year, showing an upward trend to the year-on-year jumps in the index.
We know that reducing policy restraint too fast or too much could hinder progress on inflation. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too slowly or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment.
Fed officials also made some adjustments to their forecasts for next year, projecting a slower pace of rate cuts compared to its September forecast, as well as persisting inflation. By the end of 2025, they see 2 rate deductions of 25 basis points each, which is half a percentage point less than what they anticipated 3 months ago. Inflation forecasts also jumped from 2.1% to 2.5%. These are the first projections since Donald Trump was elected the next president of the United States, and Powell remarked that it is premature to make any conclusions on how possible tariffs could affect consumer inflation. Following the Fed's decision, Wall Street tumbled with the Dow Jones falling for the 10th day straight to mark its longest downward slope since 1974. The tech-heavy Nasdaq and benchmark S&P 500 also tallied their largest drops in months. South Korean stocks and currency also fell, with the won surpassing the 1,450 to the dollar mark for the first time since the financial crisis of 2009. The Kospi closed 1.95% lower at 2,435.93, while the Kosdaq closed 1.89% down. This latest decision from the Fed brings the interest rate gap between South Korea and the US back down to 1.5 percentage points, after it widened to 1.75 percentage points in September. Finance authorities, including the country's finance minister and the Bank of Korea's governor, held a meeting on Thursday morning to discuss these developments and the domestic economic situation. The finance ministries and central banks said they would continue to operate an around-the-clock system to monitor the foreign exchange market and pledged to do their best to stabilize financial markets. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
In other news, at least 100 North Korean troops deployed to support Russia in the battlefield against Ukraine have been killed and about 1,000 injured. Now, this is according to the South Korean National Intelligence Service earlier this Thursday during a closed-door briefing to the Parliamentary Intelligence Committee. With regard to the reason behind the relatively high rate of casualty, authorities cited the inability of North Korean soldiers to respond to drone attacks and their positioning, that is, on the front lines of the war. They also shared intelligence about Kim Jong-un's presence at military training grounds, hinting at the possibility of additional troop deployments. In return, Russia is expected to modernize North Korea's conventional weapons. And the Unification Ministry here has condemned North Korea for its rejection of a joint statement sharing international concerns about its military cooperation with Moscow. The joint statement adopted earlier this week by South Korea, the US, the EU and 8 other nations linked the military agreement between Pyongyang and Moscow to violations of multiple UN Security Council resolutions and to reckless escalation of the Kremlin's war against Ukraine. In response, North Korea's foreign ministry denounced the statement, dismissing it as slandering normal cooperative relations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with NATO and European Union leaders in Brussels on Wednesday. On the agenda were ways to bolster Ukraine's air defense and post-war recovery strategies. This latest interaction comes amid uncertainty over U.S. military support for Ukraine against Russian invasion under a second Trump administration. Meanwhile, President Zelensky is also scheduled to attend the EU summit on Thursday. Moscow has warned Washington against, quote, geopolitical games that place pressure on nations such as Russia, China and North Korea, which all possess nuclear weapons. According to Russian state media, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov claimed Washington was seeking to maintain its global dominance by recklessly pressuring countries that have nuclear weapons, which could have disastrous consequences. Yet on a more amiable note, he also spoke of Moscow willing to normalize relations with Washington under the incoming U.S. administration. And the U.S. Senate has approved a critical defense policy bill for next year that also includes intentions to maintain the current size of U.S. military presence in South Korea. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
The U.S. Senate on Wednesday passed the National Defense Authorization Act for the 2025 fiscal year with 85 votes in favor and 14 against. The bill, worth $895.2 billion, also includes provisions to maintain the current level of U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. According to the NDAA, the budget allows for the maintaining of approximately 28,500 U.S. Forces Korea troops, strengthening the mutual defense industrial base and reaffirming extended deterrence commitment, utilizing all U.S. defense capabilities. The Pentagon was also ordered to report on plans to strengthen the U.S. extended deterrence commitment to South Korea and ways to advance defense cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The passage of the budget bill also comes almost a month before President-elect Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office. Trump has previously threatened to pull U.S. troops out of South Korea and has demanded that Seoul increases its contribution to the cost of stationing USFK troops. Meanwhile, top Democrats and Republicans at the U.S. Congress reached an agreement on Wednesday on a continuing resolution preventing a possible government shutdown just before the start of the new U.S. administration. The bill allows for the federal agencies to be funded through March 14th. The stopgap measure would keep the roughly $6.2 trillion federal budget running at its current level and also includes a $100.4 billion package in new emergency funding to help states like North Carolina and Florida recover from recent natural disasters. While the vote is likely to pass, should lawmakers fail to act in time, the government would enter a partial shutdown beginning on Saturday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
China, meanwhile, has been expanding its nuclear arsenal, and as of May this year, it reportedly has over 600 operational nuclear warheads. Now, this is according to an annual report on China's military power by the Pentagon released on Wednesday. U.S. officials also believe China will possess over 1,000 nuclear warheads by the year 2030. Meanwhile, regarding China's military modernization goal for 2027, the country has seen, quote, uneven progress as cases of corruption have reportedly disrupted progress.
The cold spell continued today as the temperature this morning in Seoul was minus 6.7 degrees Celsius, which is the lowest temperature this winter so far. However, the temperature rose to 5 degrees with clear skies during the day. It is easy to catch a cold with these sudden temperature changes, so please take care. With the lowest temperatures this winter in various parts of western regions, currently a cold wave advisory is issued in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and some areas in Gangwon-do province. However, this cold spell will slow down a bit until Saturday morning, which is Dongji on the lunar calendar. Tomorrow, Seoul, Gwangju, and Daegu will start off at minus 2 degrees, Chuncheon minus 7. Highs will move up to 4 degrees in Seoul, Busan 10 degrees. Starting with western parts of the country tomorrow afternoon, more snow is expected in most parts of the country on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon the security implications of the political uncertainty here.
AI, what are some dishes you should try in Korea?
Recommended food to eat in Korea are Korean barbecue, fried chicken, kimchi, kimbap, kukbap.
에이, 이걸론 부족하지. 진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K-바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 클래식한 치킨부터 한강뷰 치킨까지. 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지? 김치? 종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색. 김밥? 시장에선 이렇게, 산에선 이렇게, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥? 취향 따라, 입맛 따라. 마무리까지 완벽하게.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
저희 크래비티가 또 ASC에 나올 거기 때문에 다음에도 재밌는 시간 함께 즐겨요.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama. A story of us where hope and despair coexist. Fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
Acting President Han Duck-soo has been actively working to reassure the country's partners about its commitment to security and stability despite the political uncertainty within national borders. Now, following talks with US President Joe Biden on the phone this past weekend, Han also reached out to Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba today. With more on Press Perspective. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Thursday, December 18th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today, we touch upon the broader security implications of the political uncertainty here in the country amid brewing tensions with North Korea and a power transition in the US. For more on this, I have Chloe Bognon with France 24 here in the studio. Chloe, welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
I also have Professor Park Won-gon at Ewha Women's University with us virtually. Professor Park, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Right, Chloe, we will start here in the studio. As I mentioned at the start, the acting president has been quite busy seeking to ease diplomatic concerns about Korea's political fallout. Now, he had talks with US President Joe Biden last Sunday and talks with the Japanese Prime Minister today. Tell us a bit more about his efforts.
Yeah, so the phone call on Sunday, the 15th, was between acting President Han Duck-soo and US President Joe Biden. It was a 16-minute call, so that's quite a long one. And it's interesting to see that it was the day after the impeachment vote. So really, the US did not wait to get back in contact with South Korea. The goals here were to reassure the allies, same with the call with the Prime Minister, like Japanese Prime Minister. It's reassuring South Korean allies, bring back stability into the foreign diplomacy, because obviously with all what happened in the past 2 weeks, diplomacy has been a bit shaken. And also mend the link, this very special bond with the US, because it's one of the main thing that the United States said right after the declaration of martial law. They were like, we were not made aware of it before. And it's kind of a remark that kind of stayed there, that the US were like we were pushed to the back on this situation. So the acting President Han Duck-soo said that it was important to solidify the South Korean and the US defense, like common defense posture in face of common challenges posed by North Korea mostly. We might come back on this point later. And President Joe Biden said that the ironclad US and South Korea alliance remain unchanged, and he also kind of complimented South Korea for the resilience and the maturity of the democracy. So in the White House statement, the US president said that he expressed his appreciation actually for this resilience. We spoke about it last week, about the stability and the need for the US to have stability here in South Korea. And that's kind of what perspired into this call, actually. And it's also important for the South Korean government to be able to mend this relationship, this very specific relationship with the US before the mandate of Donald Trump. That might bring some uncertainty, and so that's also what this call was for. And same thing with Japanese Prime Minister today. It was kind of a way to say, we are still here and things are going on forward from now on.
Right, they did reaffirm their commitment to bilateral ties. That is the talk between Mr. Han and, of course, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. And before we delve further, Chloe, could you tell us a bit about Han Duck-soo and his current role?
Yeah, so let's start with his current role. So since the suspension of President Yoon on Saturday the 14th at 7:24 p.m., he got, from the presidential power, the constitution states that the prime minister has to take over as an acting role. So he's acting president right now. Until when? That's the big question. So now the constitutional court is judging if they have to decide if they want to remove Yoon Suk-yeol from his presidential office or not. So as long as there is no president, well, the prime minister has to be acting president. So it could take up to 180 days for the Constitutional Court to decide if they want to remove Yoon Suk-yeol or not. If they don't remove him, he'll come back, be president again. If they remove him, it's 2 more months, like maximum 60 days, to get another election, presidential election. And once the president is elected, then again, the acting president can step down and give the spot again. There's an important point there, is that the Constitution doesn't detail how much power he has. So most of the experts are saying he should, have a limited level of powers, just to go through the main affairs, make sure that the state is not paralyzed, and make sure that the government is functioning through this grave political crisis. And that's also, there was a press conference for foreign journalists recently, like yesterday, and there was the Minister of Economy and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and one of the messages that they delivered was to say, governmental affairs are going on, and the government officials are working and are back into motion, and things are going on in the usual way. So that's kind of the message that they want to convey now. And so regarding Mr. Han Duck-soo himself, so he's a 75-year-old technocrat. He's been prime minister under Yoon Suk-yeol mandate since the beginning. It's interesting to see that in his 30-plus years career, he's been at the level, leading position, both under the Democrats and under the Conservative leaders, and that's something that could be a very strong point for him when we see that today the political field is quite divided, and they might need here in South Korea a bit of someone who's able to navigate through both sides and try to help them mend each other again.
Right. Try to help them bridge the gap over differences then. Professor Park, Mr. Han Duck-soo reached out to U.S. military authorities to reaffirm commitment to security in light of possible provocations by Pyongyang as well. Now, some scholars here believe that North Korea may refrain from acts of aggression, if you will, for a while, as it hopes to see the opposition Democratic Party of Korea win a snap election. Do you, Professor Park, share this outlook?
Well, actually, I agree with that, because we are seeing this very interesting reaction by North Korea, because North Korea has reported on the situation in South Korea twice since the declaration of martial law. And these both reports are factual, not the interpret at all, and did not strongly advocate their own views, evaluation or policy directions. And this very cautious approach reflected North Korea's very deliberate stance toward the current situation in South Korea. And I think this is a very stark contrast to their previous very strong and highly critical rhetoric against the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. The Yoon administration, we all know that, has implemented the most very strong and robust deterrence policy toward North Korea among the all South Korean government to date. So as a result, North Korea has been restrained from carrying out limited provocation against South Korea. I can say that deterrence is working. So more about the Yoon administration institutionalized with the United States so-called extended deterrence policy to strengthen security measures and enhance trilateral security cooperation between South Korea, United States, and Japan to deter North Korea further. So in this context, North Korea would likely view President Yoon's impeachment process as kind of a favorable development. However, if North Korea criticized the Yoon administration or engage in provocation, during this very sensitive time, it could face criticism for interfering in South Korea's domestic political situation. So therefore, North Korea is expected to proceed with a very extreme caution and restraint. Additionally, you asked me this question, since the Democratic Party emphasized engagement with North Korea, Pyongyang may view it more favorable compared to the People Power Party.
Staying with that, Professor Park, then, hypothetically speaking, of course, do you suppose an opposition victory of the snap election here in South Korea will perhaps offer the international community with a perhaps fresh opportunity to address tensions on the Korean peninsula?
Well, as mentioned just before, North Korea might perceive this current situation in South Korea as advantageous to choose to exercise restraint in its provocations. And additionally, with North Korea's currently deploying troops to the Russian-Ukraine war, its capacity for aggressive actions towards South Korea is somewhat limited. However, the possibility of South Korea's domestic political turmoil, increasing instability on the Korean peninsula, cannot be completely ruled out. For example, with the potential inauguration, with the upcoming inauguration of Trump's administration on January 20th, North Korea may seek to assert its presence by intentionally heightening tension on the peninsula. From this perspective, this prolonged political instability in South Korea is undesirable for sure. And also, it is crucial for political stability to be restored quickly so that security conditions, especially including ROK-US alliance, can be also stabilized.
Right, and speaking about the return of a Donald Trump administration in the U.S. next month, Chloe, there is also talk about the possibility of another summit between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un. And this talk came about because of the return, I believe, of a key figure who helped negotiate the previous summits under the first Trump administration. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular person and the prospects of such a summit between Kim Jong-un and Mr. Trump?
Yeah, so this person is Alex Wong. He's been nominated as Deputy National Security Advisor on the 22nd of November. So just for you to know, this is in the White House national security lineup is number 2. So that's quite an important key role there. And it's also interesting to note that in the statement announcing his nomination, Donald Trump emphasized his expertise on North Korea. And he said about Alex Wong, and I'm quoting him here, he helped negotiate my summit with North Korean leader Kim. So he's he was also, second in command in the denuclearization talk with North Korea at the time on the first term of Donald Trump. And so this very strong, high-level role, also this emphasis from Donald Trump when nominating him, that's what is bringing the speculations about the fact that these discussions with North Korea might come back. There is also a thing about it is to know, to kind of withdraw a little bit this idea that this negotiation will happen very soon. There are other matters at end for Donald Trump as well. So he's been speaking about the fact that he wants to speak again with Kim Jong-un. He said it during his campaign, but he's also been speaking about the Ukraine war, the Russian war in Ukraine, saying that he wants to, put an end to that as well. The Middle East right now is quite full of tension. So those are also matters that are going to be at end for the Trump administration when they get back in office. And another thing is, Donald Trump has been clear on that. For him, diplomacy is America first. So he's not going to engage in everything altogether. So the speculation about the discussion is probably right, because, we're probably going to discuss that again, but North Korea's threats and nuclearization issues and the fact that it's getting closer to Russia right now are matters that cannot be ignored by the US. But the question is, will it be really a first-hand matters when the Trump administration gets into office? This is more of, the question.
Right. And aside from face-to-face talks between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un, Professor Park, some analysts claim that the incoming Trump administration may resume the so-called back-channel diplomacy with North Korea. Now, does the power vacuum here in South Korea, Professor Park, raise the possibility of the new U.S. administration perhaps sidelining South Korea from engagements with the Kim Jong-un regime? And if that is the case, Professor Park, what would be the repercussions of that reality?
Well, as Crowley just mentioned, that the appointment of the Alex Wang and Richard Grenell can be seen as the reflection of Trump's willingness to engage in dialogue with North Korea. So in Trump's effort to engage with North Korea, I think there is some possibility that South Korea could be sidelined to some extent. But however, it is worth noting that during the Trump's first term, he often operates major foreign policy without close consultation or cooperation with allies and friendly nations. Trump favors so-called White House-centered or president-centered approach, preferring to personally oversee diplomacy rather than relying on the systemic effort by the State Department. And during the Trump's first term, cooperation between South Korea and the United States was largely facilitated through the communication channel established between then South Korean Special Representative Lee Do-hun and U.S. Special Representative Stephen Biegun, rather than through any special consideration for South Korea by Trump. So the key question here is that what issue and agenda Trump would want to discuss with Kim Jong-un. In my view, as Trump has indicated in recent interviews, including his Newsweek interview and one 3 days ago, his primary agenda may focus on the securing the withdrawal of the North Korean troops deployed in the Russian-Ukraine war as a step toward ending the conflict. We all know that ending the Russian-Ukraine war is the top priority of the central promise in Trump's foreign policy agenda. So to achieve this, Trump has essentially stated that removing North Korea's troops from the conflict is a necessary first step. And secondly, Trump would not want North Korea to cause disruptions while he focuses on resolving the Russian-Ukraine war and the Middle East issues. From this perspective, Trump may aim to restore dialogue channels with North Korea to keep the regime under his control. And another critical question is then, what about the Kim Jong-un? Does he have any intention to meet Trump this time? Well, given the humiliation Kim Jong-un has experienced at the Hanoi summit in February 2019, he is unlikely to agree to meeting easily. Based on the Kim's so-called front breakthrough line, the strategy announced in December 2022, and his very recent speech at the National Defense Development Conference 2024, North Korea is very clearly mentioning, and Kim Jong-un himself mentioned that they expect to have some kind of precondition for resuming dialogue with the United States. And specifically, they are talking about two important things. One is their right to development, and the other is their right to survival. So overall, it seems unlikely that the United States and North Korea will easily come to the table for talks. And even if they do meet, reaching an agreement will be significantly more challenging than during the 2018-19 periods, given the vast different circumstances.
Right. And against this backdrop, Chloe, a recent commentary published by U.S. think tank RAND appears to suggest that the incoming Trump administration should accept North Korea as a nuclear state. What exactly does it say? And also, Chloe, do tell us how other designated nuclear states, like France, of course, would respond to a Trump administration accepting North Korea as a nuclear power.
Yeah, so in this article, the RAND think tank said that they came back actually to the failure of the Hanoi summit in 2019 that Professor Park just mentioned, saying that from this point and from the defeat at that moment for the Kim Jong-un regime, we've seen a rise of bellicosity from North Korea that's been increasing in the years, and that's leading to what we see now with North Korea engaging with Russia. And so they are saying that Donald Trump has said that he wants to reunite and he wants to start dialogue again, but that there is new challenges to be taken in account. And so they list quite a few of them, but it's interesting to see so that they're saying that there's the question of the Juche doctrine. So that's the idea that North Korea has to be self-reliant and have its own self-defense, which were the main argument to develop the nuclear weapons, actually. This is a doctrine that's currently been a bit of changed by Kim Jong-un, but it's one point that it's hard to know now what the regime is really thinking and really, how they're really developing through that. But second thing is, obviously, North Korea has been getting closer to Russia, and they need less the US to exist on the international scene. So they've been taking steps actually toward being a more confident nuclear state. So they are kind of different from the last time Donald Trump talked to North Korea. So what they're saying is that because of all those changes and new challenges, there might be a point where the US will have to stop clinging to denuclearization of North Korea as a preliminary state, and instead accept the fact that they are a nuclear-powered nation, and from there on go on to make sure that they restrain their nuclear power, actually. So what they're saying is basically, let's stop speaking about denuclearization first and accept that nuclearization is here, and instead make sure that they do not develop too many weapons. They're also saying that actually it's part of the propaganda from North Korea, saying the US are threatening North Korea or trying to take away all means of defense. And in the Rand article, what they're saying is, if you tell them you're a nuclear-powered nation, you're kind of taking that away from the propaganda. Then there will be, obviously, so that's one scenario developed by the think tank. I'm not sure that's the kind of scenario that the US would follow, but it's interesting to see if that was to happen. I would say most of the other countries that are nuclear-powered countries will not accept it. If I'm taking just the stance of France, France is part of the non-proliferation treaty agreement, and they're quite strict on that. I mean, France is one of the big nuclear-powered and nuclear weapons of nation. But if you look at the example of France, for example, on the Iran question, they are really saying that the nuclear escalation is dangerous in Iran. They are calling for negotiation to make sure that the program does not develop too much. And on North Korea, they're also watchful on the matter. France has voted in the past, the UN section, against North Korean development of ballistic program for nuclear and nuclear tests. And they are saying that they see North Korean nuclear program as dangerous for the world, and they are kind of calling for the non-proliferation. So they would probably not accept to call North Korea a nuclear country, actually.
Right. So while France would be in strong opposition against a nuclear North Korea, what, Professor Park, would be perhaps the implications if the incoming Trump administration decides to accept North Korea as a nuclear power? What would that mean for us here in South Korea? And as a scholar, what are your thoughts regarding such a possibility?
Well, I agree with what just Chloe mentioned, because it's very less likely that the United States and, of course, another for the officially recognized nuclear weapon state by the 1968 NPT treaty, including France, to acknowledge North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state. Because if it would allow that North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state, it simply dismantle the 1968 NPT treaty, and it's can bring some kind of a domino effect to going nuclearized many countries, including South Korea too, probably Japan, and even Taiwan too. So I don't think Trump administration, and especially President Trump himself, would accept North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state. But at this moment, it is true that the Washington, D.C., and although the dominant view or the idea about the denuclearization of North Korea is unrealistic, because for past several years, North Korea has achieved at least their capability to attack South Korea. And Kim Jong-un himself continuously mentioned that he has no intention to resume any kind of a denuclearization talk. He keeps saying that some kind of arms reduction talk, and arms reduction talk means that it's considering North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state. So overall, I don't think it's officially accepted. North Korea is officially accepted as the de facto nuclear weapon state, but it is very important that whether United States continue, especially President Trump and Trump administration, continue to provide so-called extended transport to South Korea or not, but because we all know that the Trump administration sees the allies' relationship with a transactional way. So the Trump administration demands most of the allies and friendly countries to increase their defense sharing. So without that, the Trump mentioned several times, and he probably undermined his defense commitment and security commitment for the allies' countries. So all this is a very important moment, but I don't think Trump administration, Trump himself would accept North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state.
Right, and hopefully, Professor Park, you are right then, for the security of the Korean Peninsula and that of the world as well. Professor Park, as always, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you for having me.
Right, and Chloe, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow, that is Friday.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama.